and trade unions in the Nordic region and FEPS in Brussels. My name is Maria Arkeby, and I'm the Deputy Director of the think tank Tiden here in Sweden. First off, some practical matters. In case of a fire, do not use the elevator, use the stairs, and we gather in the park across the street. For maximum air quality, keep the doors closed at all times, and no food in this room. And smoking is also naturally outside. With the digital revolution, the workplace has seen a rapid introduction of digital technologies for gig work, remote work, surveillance, and algorithmic management for workers. Some of the consequences of this transition have become clear. For instance, digital technology has facilitated a split in the labor market, with jobs increasingly lousy or lovely. But contrary to employment status and precariousness, what is less obvious are the effects of digital tech on the nature of work itself and across the labor market. During this public event, we are bringing together researchers, policymakers, trade unionists, and other stakeholders. And some of the topics of discussion here today are the challenge of algorithmic management poses for safeguarding workers' rights, if AI developments are a potential threat to the Nordic model, for instance, by increasing inequalities and/or reducing workers' co-determination. To what extent the tech revolution is being felt on the work floor, and what are the political implications at both the Swedish and European levels. And as you can hear, will be done by about 10 o'clock tonight. So let's get to it. We have a full day ahead of us, and I'll be guiding you through it. We'll have different moderators during different panels, but I will hold your hand throughout the day. And doing so means that I'll also be ruthless in timekeeping, so do not take that personally. First off, I would like to give the floor to the three organizers to give their opening remarks and view of today's topic. And I start by welcoming Elisabeth Brandt Ygeman, Chief of Staff here at LO. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria, and it's very nice to stand here to welcome you to this important conference led by machines, algorithmic management, and workers' rights. We got it today to confront and discuss the challenges and opportunities presented by algorithmic management and digitalization in our workplaces. Our theme today reminds me of a quote from Tage Danielsson, which was a Swedish comedian and writer, who said, "If you refuse to look back and don't dare to look forward, you better watch out." And this is a timely reminder for all of us. We should be well versed in the lessons of our past to navigate the future. The Swedish labor movement has long believed that digitalization must be guided by progressive policies. And our approach centers on building competence and capacity among workers, ensuring their participation and co-determination through tech-neutral, future-proof legislation. But let's talk openly. We can't deny the challenges that new technology bring. Algorithmic systems can dictate work patterns today. They can evaluate performance and even influence hiring and firing decisions. But the answer to these challenges lies in the principles that have guided us for decades. We must be proactive in shaping and designing our working environments. A human-centric approach must also guide us in adopting and adapting new technology. Workers' participation and co-determination rights are more important than ever. As we move into workplaces increasingly guided by algorithms, it becomes imperative that labor organizations are equipped to negotiate the collective agreements that protect workers' rights in this setting. So trade unions do have an important role to play in navigating the landscape of algorithmic management. And our organization has also a responsibility. We have the responsibility, but we also have the right to be at forefront of shaping these technologies, that these technologies are implemented and managed in the workplace. And of course, we can't be reactive. We have to be proactive. We have to pushing for policies and collective agreements that govern the workplaces. And it's also our duty to educate our members about the implications of these technologies and give them tools who they need to advocate them for themselves. And that's really important. In this way, trade unions can act as a critical counterbalance to the power of algorithmic systems, ensuring that technology serves the people, not the other way around. And of course, employers have a role to play. They must act responsibly when implementing new technologies. We know that they don't always do that. They have to following the regulation and involving workers. When they are involving workers, we can see that it is a better process. Lastly, let us not forget that this is the core in this. Digitalization is a question of power and the division of that power. It is deeply democratic a question that we can't let digitalization create new forms of inequality and amplifying the existing ones. So the conclusion is, it's just not a challenge, it's an opportunity. An opportunity for us to build a future where digitalization and algorithmic management serve us, not the other way around. A future that honors our values about democracy, equality, and solidarity. I hope this day will be a great day, and it's really fun to start this project together, and I hope we learn a lot together. Thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth, and thank you for being here today. Then we move on to Johan Sjölander from the think tank Tiden.
Well, thank you so much, Maria, and thank you, Elisabeth, for your opening words, and not least to letting us be here at this beautiful venue with this conference. It's really nice being here in this quite newly built, it really feels that way. Well, thank you. My name is Johan Sjölander. I'm the director of Tankesmedjan Tiden, one of the Nordic think tanks. We are based in Sweden, who are arranging this network of think tanks who are making this thing here today. I think Jan-Erik, who will come in after me, will talk a bit more about the strategic ideas behind this project and the history of it. But I would still like to take the opportunity to make some opening remarks about what this is and some of the reasons that we from Tiden, I think many of us other have put so much commitment into this project. Because this day today, we are all looking forward to, is actually part of a much larger 2-year research project, putting the focus on algorithmic leadership. How can you protect workers' rights in the workplace during a time of this strong and changing technical development? And actually, I think this is the first time this is done on this scale, because this is a cooperation not only between Nordic progressive think tanks in Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, but also with FEPS, the Brussels-based think tank working in mostly on European level. And this sort of broad cooperation on this scale, I think it's never been done before. And it wouldn't be possible, of course, without the substantial support from the Nordic trade unions who are really supporting this. So as I'm standing here, I'm happy to be here because, we've been working on a project for a long time, and then suddenly it happens and people are sitting in a room physically, and all those dreams and ideas are becoming reality. But I'm also humbled by the sort of engagement, the sort of commitment that so many people and organizations have put into making this possible, to put this question on the agenda, to really do the research, to put the resources to actually make things happen, to understand what is happening and in the future changes. This is at the core a research project. We have some brilliant researchers from all over the Nordic countries and Europe working together to look deeply into how algorithmic leadership is changing work life. How is it affecting people actually working there? We'll ask people and we see what is myth and what is reality. And even more so, this is about understanding what is happening, but even more so, it's about changing what is happening. What should be done? What should not be done? How do we know what to do at what time and how to do it? And I think it's a very important thing here is sort of represented by who we are that are doing this. Because I think it's a cooperation between Nordic think tanks and Nordic trade union support, and we're working with FEPS in Brussels. So I think this is a European Nordic approach to it, with the Nordic model as being like at the core of our hearts, and that's what we are looking for. But we realize we have to do this together on the European level. And I think that's really important, actually. But that is taking the best of the Nordic countries and our tradition of the Nordic model of strong trade unions, collective bargaining, and working on a European level. So I think we have some great opportunities here to really make a difference. Some short remarks. I have this very talented intern at Tankesmedjan Tiden. His name is Tobias. You probably met him when he took your name up in the reception. One of those young, talented, bright men who makes you believe in the future. And when he started working on this project, he sent me this science fiction novel. You should read this, Johan, he said, when working on algorithmic leadership. This is really something. And it's called Manny, and it's written by a guy named Marshall Bain, who actually I think he mostly produces like self-help books for like how you use Windows and stuff like that, but he's written this science fiction novel. And it's about algorithmic leadership, and it starts in a hamburger restaurant, when they realized you can take out the management and use programs instead, and much more efficient because you can like plan your queues and when to clean the toilets. And it spreads all over America, and the middle management in most sectors disappear and are replaced by programs. And I guess this is how you know it's science fiction, because nobody loves the middle management, unless in the real world, but we love them. So this is a real science fiction story. And it becomes quite dystopian in the end, very dystopian. So this is raw capitalism, and people are put away from our labor market, and by being led by machines, you actually become machines. And then there's this utopia, because he goes to Australia, this character. And there you have used technology to the benefit of men, and everybody's free, and they have machines in your body. It's very complicated, but it's anyway, this utopian freedom vision. So I read this novel was sent by my intern. I mean, it's interesting. It's not, he probably won't win the Nobel Prize, but I think, in a way, to think of it in those two terms, this is literally science fiction, utopia, dystopia, because there are elements of both. I mean, there are some dystopian things with control, surveillance, workers being turned into machines by led by machines. And there are also some utopian. Technology can be something really good. And how do we make the right way to happen? How do we change the future? So I think that's is the future of work, is it a utopia, is it a dystopia? In a way, that's the thing we are discussing. And how can we make the difference between those two paths to the future? And I think that's really, I can't see many other things that are more important to actually address than those questions. What's the future of work? What's the future of society, in a sense? So I'm very glad to see you here. I'm looking very much forward to listening to all your bright and interesting things. I mean, the panels are impressive that we have before us. I'm grateful that we can be here. I'm grateful for the support the project has had. And I'm very happy that the person talking after me here is probably the one person who is who has been most important for this to happen. Jan-Erik, who will enter the floor after me here, I think without his vision, without his stubbornness, without his driving, we wouldn't be here today. Because we needed someone who saw this is important, we should work together, trade unions, think tanks, from the Nordic countries, from Europe, and we really should do something that can make a change. So Jan-Erik, without your work, we wouldn't be here today, so I'm very glad that you're here, I'm very glad that we are here, all of you, and thank you for all being here, and I'm looking forward to this very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan, and you stole all my my welcoming remarks for Jan-Erik. So I just concur. You've been a true driving force in this project, Jan-Erik. So very welcome to enter the stage.
Dear all, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Maria, Elisabeth, Johan. Thank you for those extremely kind words. And I must admit, I thought I'd start on this personal note, that I'm rather proud standing here today, looking what came out of that idea, that initiative, and quite a lot of hard work by many people, because you can understand with the complexities in this, there are quite a lot of stubbornness by many people and most nitty-gritty in addition to the bright ideas. So it was a long shot, but it feels really good. SAMAK. That is the most important unknown organization in the Nordic political organization in the Nordic countries. Remember that. So it's the trade unions. LO is a member, of course, and the social democratic parties in the Nordic countries. My name is Jan-Erik Støstad. I am Secretary General of this organization. We think of ourselves, I think, as the caretakers of the Nordic model. Not the only ones, but we feel that way. From a political perspective, the purpose of this program is to understand and take progressive political charge of digitalization of the labor market, perhaps especially at the firm level. The Nordic micro model, a fundamental part of the Nordic model, as everybody here knows. And I think this is really an essential task for the future. But we also had 4 more specific strategic institutional purposes with this project. And you sort of mentioned a bit of this, Johan, but anyway, it is first to increase the cooperation between FEPS and the Nordic think tanks. Many of those are members of FEPS too. I guess everybody knows here what FEPS is, but anyway, I think I won't go into that. The Brussels Social Democratic Political Foundation. And it was important for SAMAK to increase the knowledge of the Nordic model at FEPS and then also at the Brussels bubbles. For FEPS, it's important for progressives in the Brussels bubble. At the same time, the FEPS had and has essential knowledge of digitalization in general, as well as what's been happening, and that's a lot at the EU level the last few years. And it was important to get that competence sort of transferred also into the Nordics progressive movement. So that was 2 things about the cooperation between FEPS and the Nordic think tanks. Second, it was to reinforce the network of progressive think tanks in the Nordic countries. SAMAK took the initiative 5 years ago for, let's say, a network meeting once or twice a year, talking about what's happening. Now we wanted to reinforce that, strengthen it, and the way to do that is to do some work together. And this is it. So that is also a major concern from SAMAK. Thirdly, it is to foster stronger cooperation between the Nordic progressive think tanks and the trade unions. And not only the main trade unions, but also the more specific trade unions within the different sectors. And not least because the trade unions, I think more than the think tanks, know what's going on the ground. So this would help the think tanks understand what's happening out there and then hence become more relevant. Finally, and fourth, such a program also breaks a new strategic ground for FEPS with a more stable funding, not project but programs, with clustering of several member foundations because they have so many, and also increased attention to the Nordics. And I was a vice president of FEPS, so I knew that these were concerns within FEPS, and then I suddenly understood there's possibility to join forces in this way. So for me and for SAMAK, it was made sort of good sense to take this initiative. Let me mention also, but for me, this program is a natural extension of the report Justin Nocherede of FEPS sitting behind in the auditorium here. We made a report in 2020 called A Progressive Approach to Digital Tech, Taking Charge of Europe's Digital Future, which tried to make a political progressive roadmap of digitalization on a more in a more general way. So this is sort of an example of what we need to work further on, and I think perhaps public services, which has been mentioned also earlier in this process, that may be something that's coming after this project. So, and this has been translated, and perhaps it should be sort of made a kind of living document too. And then allow me then to end also on a personal note, because this is in fact my last public appearance as Secretary General of SAMAK. So I retire in 8 days. So simply said, I'm both sad and happy, or happy and sad. I'm not so sure. I'm not sure. So this is a major thing for me. I just want to share with you. So then it's natural for me to close by thanking everybody connected to this program, and especially Justin, without whom, and connected to SAMAK for a fantastic voyage in the final years of my working life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan-Erik, and it's been a pleasure being on this journey with you. It is obvious that this is a topic with many aspects and many pressing issues, and I look forward to the rest of the day. Now it is my great honor to introduce one of our keynote speakers, Gunilla Svantorp. Gunilla is a member of parliament here in Sweden for the Social Democratic Party since 2010. And these issues are very much on the agenda right now. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts. And I think we'll also have some time to open up for questions once Gunilla is done. So very welcome to you, Gunilla.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. As you said, I'm one of the 349 MPs in the Swedish Riksdag, one of 107 from the Social Democrats, and I'm also a spokesperson for the party in the questions of transport and communications, both physical and digital. Yeah, and I've been in the parliament since 2010, and last period I was the chair in the Committee of Education. But I started my engagement in the labor union Kommunal when I was a day mother for my own 4 children, and during 12 years, 32 more children passing my home. And then I started my engagement because I wanted to change, you know, the conditions and the world. We live in a time of rapid and revolutionary change. The digital revolution has transformed our way of communicating, working, learning, and living. But what does the digital revolution mean for politics? How does it affect our democratic institutions, our human rights, our global cooperation, and our future development? I want to highlight some of the most important political implications of the digital revolution, both positive and negative. And I also want to suggest some possible solutions to deal with the challenges and opportunities that the digital revolution brings. First, the digital revolution has increased the opportunities for citizens to participate in political processes. Through social media, online platforms, and digital tools, we can express our opinions, organize ourselves, influence decision makers, and hold them accountable. We can also access more information, knowledge, and perspective than ever before. The digital revolution has thus the potential to strengthen democracy and promote civic engagement. But the digital revolution has also created new risks for democracy. The increased amount of information can lead to misinformation, fake news, polarization, and manipulation. We see that every day. The digital revolution has also made it possible for authoritarian regimes to monitor, censor, and control their citizens. The digital revolution has thus also the potential to undermine democracy and violate human rights. Second, the digital revolution has changed the conditions for global cooperation. Through digitalization, the world has become more interconnected and dependent on each other. The digital revolution has enabled new forms of international cooperation, such as in trade, development, environment, and security. The digital revolution has also contributed to spreading values, culture, and ideas across borders. And the digital revolution has thus the potential to promote globalization and peace. But the digital revolution has also created new tensions in global cooperation. The increased competition for digital resources, markets, and influence can lead to conflicts, inequality, and protectionism. The digital revolution has also challenged the international order and legality, such as through cyber attacks, data breaches, and digital sovereignty. The digital revolution has thus also the potential to threaten globalization and peace. And the third, the digital revolution has influenced our opportunities for future development. Through innovations in artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, and nanotechnology, we have created new solutions to improve our health, education, energy, production, and transport. The digital revolution has also opened up new possibilities for creating a more sustainable and inclusive society. The digital revolution has thus the potential to promote human development and welfare. But the digital revolution has also created new challenges for future development. The rapid technology development can lead to ethical, social, and environmental dilemmas, such as through genetic modification, automation, digital divide, and climate change. The digital revolution has also questioned our human identity, morality, and meaning, such as through virtual reality, transhumanism, and singularity. The digital revolution has thus also the potential to threaten human development and welfare. The digital revolution is one of the most decisive factors of our time, as we have heard before today. It has changed and will continue to change our politics, our world, and our lives. We face great challenges and opportunities that require our engagement, our responsibility, and our cooperation. We must be aware of the political implications of the digital revolution and act to create a better future for us all. To effectively address labor rights and social safety nets within the digital economy, we legislators must collaborate with several key stakeholders. For example, as we do now, workers and their labor unions. Involving workers and their labor unions in the legislative process is crucial to ensure that laws align with their needs and interests. We all know that they can provide valuable insights into the working conditions and benefits that need regulations. For the second, employers and industry associations. Collaborating with employers and industry associations is important to understand how law and regulations impact business and economic growth. They can also offer perspective on what is reasonable and feasible within the industry. And for the third, expert groups and researchers. Consulting with experts and researchers in the field can help base legislation on scientific knowledge and empirical data, leading to more effective policy measures. And for the fourth, civil society and non-governmental organizations. Partnering with non-governmental organizations and groups advocating for workers' rights and social safety nets can ensure that legislation is fair and inclusive. And for the fifth, international collaborations. Since the digital economy is global, it's important to cooperate with other countries and international organizations to harmonize regulations and create a unified framework. I think we have to take place in the negotiations in EU and address the importance and necessary measures that leads to regulations. We have been quite silent the last year because we had the share in the EU. But now it's time to step forward, and that's the government who has to do that. But we also, as an opposition, has to do that. And by involving these diverse stakeholders, legislators, and as me and others can gain a broader understanding of the complex issues surrounding the digital economy and workers' rights. It can also help create policies that are balanced and effective. The worst thing legislators can do in the field of addressing labor rights and social safety nets in the digital economy is to not take action or take insufficient action. There are some things I think that we must avoid. For the first, ignoring the impact of digitalization. If legislators ignore the rapid changes that digitalization brings to the labor market, it can lead to increased vulnerability and insecurity for workers in the digital economy. And for the second, withholding basic rights. Failing to provide basic labor rights can lead to exploitation and inequality. And for the third, tax regulation of digital platforms. If legislators do not introduce regulations for digital platforms, it can allow them to evade the responsibility for working conditions, safety, and social security for workers who use their services. And for the fourth, cutbacks in social safety nets, reducing funding for social safety nets and limiting access to health care, unemployment benefits, and pensions can make workers more vulnerable in the digital economy. And for the fifth, lack of stakeholders consultation, failing to involve workers, employers, trade unions, and other stakeholders in the design of laws and regulation can result in ineffective and unjust policy measures. In summary, the worst thing legislators like me can do is to not address the challenges and issues brought about by the digital economy for workers and social safety nets. Failing to take action can lead to increased insecurity and inequality in the labor market. Instead, we in Sweden, like many other countries with a strong tradition of social safety nets and labor rights, must look at the most important aspects and adapt and modernize existing laws and regulation to fit the digital economy. Here are some of the things which could be relevant for us. For the first, to update labor laws, modernize labor laws to include workers in the digital economy and ensure that they have the right to decent working conditions, including reasonable working hours, secure employment, and competitive wages. And for the second, expand social security. Ensure that workers in the digital economy have access to health insurance, unemployment insurance, and pension systems to protect them in cases of illness, unemployment, and retirement. And for the third, regulate digital platforms. Introduce regulations that require responsibility and transparency from digital platforms regarding working conditions, compensation, and worker safety. And for the fourth, promote collective agreements, support negotiations and agreements between workers and employers in the digital economy to ensure fair working conditions and benefits. And for the fifth, establish fair tax policies. Design tax systems that ensure digital platforms contribute to financing the social safety nets and the welfare of the society. And for the sixth, educate and encourage digital skills. Invest in education and skill development for workers to help them adapt to changes in the job market. Balancing the innovation of the digital economy with the protection of workers' rights and welfare will be crucial for Sweden and all other countries as well. And it's necessary to collaborate with all relevant stakeholders to achieve these goals. And I could be a bit scared about what's going to happen in the field of workers' rights with the government we now have in Sweden, led by the Sweden Democrats. If a government doesn't care about workers' rights, we know that negative consequences can occur. Workplace issues, employees may face hazardous working conditions without adequate oversight or protection, increasing the risk of accidents and injuries. Low wages and poor working conditions, lack of regulations can lead to low wages, long working hours, and unsatisfactory working conditions, affecting the well-being of workers. And weak labor unions. If the government doesn't support unions and collective bargaining, workers must struggle to defend their rights and interests. Leading to social unrest and tensions. Decreasing productively. If workers don't feel motivated or fairly treated, it can negatively impact their job performance and overall productivity of business. You know, of course, all of this, but we mustn't forget that Sweden is in a hard time now with this government. The government doesn't believe in the climate challenge. We can see that every day. The emission will increase with their politics. And what will happen with all new green jobs that the Social Democratic government talked about, and we know we must increase the green jobs. We have a lot of questions, of course, about what will happen in politics and with our country, with this government. But I'm looking forward to listen to all discussions this day and to learn more about this issue and all the different perspectives of this issue. So thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Gunilla. I personally have a few questions, and if the audience has any questions, we have a few minutes. So please raise your hand, and Gerard will walk around with the microphone. We have a question up there.
Introduce yourself maybe as well.
Great. Hi, my name is Johannes Anttila. I'm the think tank Demos Helsinki in Helsinki and working on research strand number 1 in this wonderful program. Thank you so much for your kind words. When you were going through the sort of working list of what, as a legislator, you have to do, I was wondering about the division of labor between the EU level legislators and the national level legislators. I know that for a long time in the Nordics, with this wonderful Nordic model that we have, there have been some contentions between what is the convergence that we can achieve on the EU level in terms of legislation and then what we want to sort of maintain here in the Nordics. So I was wondering your opinion and views on what are the things that we have to do and decide on the EU level, and what do we want to guard and sort of advance more on the national levels?
Yes, that's a very important question, because we shan't go to EU and get lower things than we have today. So that's what I meant when I said we have to take a bigger place in the negotiations at the EU, and to show what we are good at and to spread that to the whole Europe. But with this government, I'm not so sure that will happen.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? I can move on with some of my questions. You said the magic words which usually make the walls of this building shiver. You said modernize labor laws. And I could hear people going,
in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, what you...
Yeah, I was thinking about, I was in Estland with a committee of traffic last week or 2 weeks ago, and we visited Bolt, all those dangerous things. Yeah, and when we asked questions about the working conditions, we understand that they don't want to have any workers. They want to have employers. They want all to be. So I think, but we have people that are working for them. So that's what I mean. We can't let them down, the workers that don't earn any money, that are on provision, that don't have the security. That's what I mean when I talked about modernizing. Nothing else. I'm communal, you know.
Yeah, I know. I just grabbed on to those words. And that brings us to the next question that I jotted down. You said we need to regulate the digital platforms. Yeah. How do we do that?
Yeah, that's a good question, but that's on our agenda, but not on my agenda, because that's another committee. But of course we have to regulate, and they also have to participate and give back. And we have, but I think we can't do that alone in Sweden. We have to do that in the EU cooperation, and that's why we have to take a bigger step. And we want to know what we want to do in Sweden before. And with this government who don't cooperate well with other parties, except for the 4 parties in the government and the Sweden Democrats, I think we have a job to do to put put another, when it's coming a suggestion, we have to put another suggestion. Then it's going to be what we call avvikande mening. I don't know what that's in English. Another suggestion that we could vote for. Yeah. So I think it's very important that we know what we want, and then we have to cooperate with you all, and not only us in the parliament.
It's almost like you know what my next question is going to be all the time, because my next question was actually, you said we've been silent for a year and now we need to step up. And now you say we need to know what we want or what we think first, and then but when you say step up.
Yeah, we also the last year when every suggestion, everything that came from the government was the former social democratic government's words. So that's why we have said yes, that's a good, and so. But now it's the new governments that are taking the paper so on and dealing with, and now we have to step up and say we have a better suggestion that you have, and lay that avvikande mening. I think. What's the word? Someone know? Diversity, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. All right. Anybody else from the audience? Otherwise, yes.
Kenneth Abrahamson from Luleå University of Technology. How will you approach the twin challenge of digitalization and the green transformation with regard to skills updating and educational investment? Do you have some counter plan that will be like a recipe for the future?
Yeah, I've said a lot of times that we need a reform for the citizens, like the home PC reform. If you remember the home PC, when the union helped us to get our own computer, I think now it's the time that we get our skills increased by a reform, and that costs money, and that costs also teachers that should do that, and we have to have the folkbildningen to do it, because all people don't go to the university, so you have to do it at your free time at the studieförbunden, who now with the government are decreasing the budget. So, but I hope that we will have some suggestions what we will do about that. For that's the crucial question. Absolutely.
Thank you, Gunilla. All right. Well, I think that concludes that little question session. And thank you very much for being here today. We're very happy that you're going to spend the rest of the day with us, also to bring back all that inspiration for those steps forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so today is going to be about various aspects of algorithmic management, and now we will turn our heads to how it affects the Nordic model. And it's my pleasure to hand over the stage to my colleague from the Danish think tank Sevilla, Asbjørn Sonne Nørgaard. The stage is yours for the next hour.
Thank you. Thank you. The take-home point, wonderful talks by Gunilla. The take-home point, or at least the take-home point I got, was threats and potentials. In a number of ways, in a number of spheres of life, politically, socially, in terms of organization of work, and so on. So, in order to become smarter, become wiser about the balance between threats and potentials, we have to examine the facts. So I'm really happy about this project because it also addresses consequences. Both qualitatively and quantitatively, we are trying to dig into, well, we have all these fears, we have all these hopes, but what is actually going on with digitalization? Because, I mean, digitalization is one of many mega trends. We have a green revolution, we have other revolutions, but what is actually the balance between threats and potentials? And we got to know that because we are here and we are in this business because we will take action and react upon threats and potentials. That's our business. But for us to take prudent action and do smart things, we have to get the fact right. So we have to become smarter about both the potentials, the potential positive consequences, as well as the negative consequences. And of course, there is a fear in many of us that the negative consequences will overwhelm the positive, but it is our job to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, this session, we will start this discussion or dig a bit deeper into that discussion, because before we can answer threats and potentials, we have to ask ourselves, what are the values that we want to defend and promote? So therefore, before we have the panel discussion, I would like to invite Antti up here to give a little talk about what is it actually that may be threatened or strengthened by the digital revolution, namely the Nordic model that we are proud of and that we in many ways cherish. Antti?
Thank you for the introduction and the possibility to address this conference. As was said, my name is Antti Alaja. I have some background in think tank debates on different economic policy issues, and for the past years I've done some research on innovation policy and innovation studies and such things. And coming from innovation studies perspective, worries about technological unemployment are expressed during each technological paradigm shift. In the late 70s and early 80s, there were fears of impact of automation on employment in the Nordic countries, but throughout the 80s it turned into more optimistic take on technological change, and in the 2010s, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and some economists once again proclaimed the threat of jobless future. And while these fears of technological unemployment have at least not yet realized, in recent years debates have once again turned on how technologies such as artificial intelligence, digital platforms and Internet of Things are changing the nature of work and working conditions for different socioeconomic groups. Thus, the title of our first panel today is Does Algorithmic Control in the Workplace Threaten the Nordic Model? Following the recent study by International Labour Organization, algorithmic control of work can be portrayed as part of a more long-term historical trend of rationalization of economic activities and the workplace. For example, scientific Taylorism had a profound impact on how work in factories was organized in the 20th century. And in this sense, I think that algorithms are nothing new. But yet, as we know, in the era of digital and platform capitalism, massive amount of data is produced every hour, which can be utilized, organize, coordinate, and control employees in a new way. And I suppose for the most of us, the most visible kind of work in which algorithms have been used to organize and control work has been platform companies such as food delivery companies and ride-hailing companies. But I think I read this recent study that proclaimed that if we think about a platform such as YouTube, it can be considered a major case of algorithmic control because YouTube uses algorithms to remunerate content creators, and these algorithms are changed, which causes conflicts. And I suppose it's been documented that, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, algorithmic management has expanded also to traditional industries and service sectors as well. So we are not only talking about platform companies, but the economy more broadly. It has been recent studies have stated that artificial intelligence and algorithms have already been used in recruitment processes and even in some cases to sack people. When I was preparing for this talk, I noticed that it's been reported that several Finnish service sector jobs, the working hours are now set by algorithms. So it's very much a reality already. And it just made me think that what does this development do to satisfactory work-life balance and such issues? And as the previous speakers has already noted, the growth of algorithmic organization has raised concerns such as privacy, psychosocial stress, hierarchies, and loss of control of one's work. But at this point, I won't delve much deeper into these issues as the panel will discuss this in more detail. But I was rather asked to provide a brief introduction on the key characteristics of the Nordic labor market model. Since I'm talking to an expert audience at an LO building, what I'm about to say about the Nordic model is perhaps nothing new. Yet it might make sense to recap what is the Nordic model now that we are thinking about how algorithmic management might threaten the Nordic model. First, the Nordic collective bargaining system wages and working conditions are regulated by collective agreements between employer associations and comparatively strong unions. This has been one of key characteristics of the Nordic model. Of course, there are different degrees of coordination and centralization, but I could say that this has been still a common feature of the Nordics. Second, in the Nordic countries, there has been a strong local collaborative culture of co-determination as supported by union shop stewards or cooperation committees. This worker representation has usually been involved and consulted in important and consequential management questions. And third potential characteristic of the Nordic model could be say that we have it's been noted that there is this tradition of non-hierarchical culture, which is now challenged by the algorithms, as previous speakers have stated. Algorithmic management is it's a challenge to middle management and how management is conducted. Lastly, besides thinking about algorithms as a threat to the Nordic model, one can also ask how algorithmic management could be used to improve the Nordic model. For example, it is known that job applicants with foreign-sounding names are less likely to be invited to job interviews. So, is there potential for less discrimination in future? On the other hand, as we know from public debates, there are also implicit biases in algorithms and AI. So, this is it's interesting to see where where this will go in this regard. And overall, I found it laudable that all these organizations have now established this Nordics digital program that will address topics such as algorithmic management. You can challenge me on this, but at least in my experience, it has more often been the case that employers and business interests that have been active in debates on science, technology, and innovation. So I think it's really time to change that, and I suppose this program is part of this initiative. And more broadly, I think that politics and policymaking is not only about power, but knowledge production and expertise. And I think we have to build our knowledge production and expertise. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Wonderful background, also both on the Nordics. It's always a challenge when you say what is particular to the Nordics, because I guess workers in Germany and other places would also say that we have a strong tradition, at least in the labor movement, for collaboration and also at the workplace. So hopefully there will also be features about the Nordics, which is both learning points, but which can also be seen as somewhat broader than the Nordic in itself, because of course there's a strong tradition in many places and in some industries for collaborative solutions. But still, I think it does make sense in the way Antti talked about it, to talk about a Nordic model which is strongly based on a collaborative culture, and Maria talked about it, Gunilla talked about it. And you could say that if we cannot succeed here with making a worker-friendly and balanced digital transition, then where? So, anyway, now I would like to invite the four panelists up on the scene. So, Birte, please join us up here. Birte Dedden is from the ICTS, Uni Europe?
Uni Europa ICTS, it's a sector.
It's the center, yeah.
It's actually information, communication, and telecom sector within Uni.
Thank you. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And then it should be Lauri. Lauri Finér from Kalevi, Sorsa Foundation. And then we should have Thorben, Albrecht. Thank you, Thorben. From the Deutsche IG Metall. And lastly but not least, Harry Pitts from the wonderful place Exeter. Yeah, please. University of Exeter. Thank you. And we had a little prep meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it was so wonderful that as a sort of spontaneous coordination, everybody had something different on mind. So it was very easy to coordinate. We will have 4 small presentations or highlights about challenges that we should be aware of. So this is also the discussion about potentials and threats that Gunilla raised. First, Birte will give us a sort of overview about the biggest challenges. And then Lauri would dig into some of the places where it is most pronounced with algorithmic management and digitalization, namely the platform economy and the gig economy. And then Thorben will come with the more traditional sector and say, well, this is not only the gig economy, it's also broader than this. And then Harry has promised to dig a bit more into the threats and potentials in the end. So it's a 4-act introduction, and then we open up for discussion and questions, Q&A. with the audience. But first, Birte, the biggest challenges.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm really honored to be here today. So thanks a lot for having me today. So I'm Birte from Uni Europa. I'm in Brussels. And I'd like to give you a bit of a European take on the whole subject. So we've already been hearing a lot about algorithmic management and the challenges. I would like to drive that down to 3 key challenges that we see for workers nowadays. So the first one would be that AI, and in particular algorithmic management, increase the power imbalance to the disadvantage of workers. What do I mean by that? To give you concrete facts, last year, together with the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Brussels, we've run a survey across Europe in all our services sectors with about 1,400 responses, and it shows that 1 out of 3 workers is totally left in the dark regarding awareness about the use of algorithmic management at work. That means that if you ask somebody, do you use algorithmic management tools at work? They basically have no clue, or they're not sure, which is already very confronting in terms of evidence given, because we talk about it a lot from an abstract level, but it is evidence we found there. And it also means that the systems used mainly are systems to evaluate workers' performance, and also software to track the physical or digital worker activity, so monitoring systems. So those are the 2 major use cases. And so that leads to, or shows, a huge lack of transparency and a total lack of information of the workers on the ground. And that increases the power imbalance because employees actually are taken, the right for workers to engage on these issues is taken away because they lack information. So it's absolutely crucial that workers and unions take up that issue and get a seat at the table here. So they can't react actually to the introduction of technology if they don't have the information. I think it's very obvious. And so that leads me also to another issue. It's not only information, it's also health and safety. I have to have a disclaimer here. I don't want to sound totally anti-tech. It's not true, but there was a crucial word that has been mentioned today already, and it's being proactive. I'd like to really underline that. So it's not about us being against the tech revolution, it's us embracing tech and innovation, but in a worker-friendly manner. And it's our responsibility to create that worker-friendly aspect. And that's where the challenge lies. So talking about negative issues here, health and safety problems, what do I mean? It was mentioned before. The systems are used by a company to increase productivity. That is the main goal, why a company uses algorithmic management tools. So what happens, workers are pressured to perform better, they don't take breaks, they have an unreasonable rhythm of work. Think about warehouse workers that have to increase their speed, then they have injuries, and so on. So it's a really big issue also for health and safety. And very often, targets put by algorithms are unfeasible and not realistic. And if you have ranking systems, then those algorithms can also, it was mentioned, hire and fire. So you have a total lack of autonomy of workers as well. And in contact centers, there's been studies being made where it shows that there's a high level of stress, anxiety, sleep difficulties, emotional strain because of those systems being used. And then I haven't been talking about fundamental rights issues, which are there as well. You think about data protection, data privacy, you think about predictive analysis tools or emotional or voice analytics, which are actually totally impacting on worker autonomy and have a dehumanizing effect even, I'd like to say. So with all of that in mind, what are our policy demands? Because in Uni Europa, what we're doing is we also try to shape, together with our affiliates, policy demands towards the European institutions. And it has been mentioned today, it's very important that at your national level, you get your act together and really impact on the EU discussions nowadays going on the AI Act. This is absolutely crucial. So we have a couple of major demands. Number 1 is justification and transparency. So data collection or surveillance of the workforce should be done only if there is a clearly justifiable purpose. Otherwise, it's just plain no, don't do it. Workers need to be informed and consulted. And in an ideal world, unions and workers' reps would be involved in the design, deployment, and the governance of algorithmic management systems. This is really crucial. But to do so, we need support from technical experts. In a regular union environment, you are not an IT expert, right? Unless you're in the engineering union, maybe. But basically, we would advocate that unions invest in external expertise to get that knowledge, to be able to confront the employers on a level playing field. So this is something that you have to discuss at national level and at local level in your union structures. And with that, asking the question about what's the impact on the Nordic model, I think the main key request, and that has been mentioned before, is social dialogue and collective bargaining are essential tools to address these issues, especially in an environment like here in Sweden, where the government will not be of a great help. So it's really up to you, and I really have I call to you as social democrats and unions, this is your moment, and it's a threat, and at the same time, it's a possibility to step up the game and to really engage with collective bargaining and to give you more profile as union organizations and to really go for it and put that on your bargaining agenda. It's absolutely crucial. With that, I'd like to mention that with the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Brussels, we are running a project at the moment, gathering information about collective bargaining agreements across Europe on AI. And if you have anything to share with us, you're more than welcome. But not a lot of unions have done that as of yet. There's a lot of guidance provided, but collective bargaining agreements per se on AI, it's not a lot of information we have about that at the moment, but we're looking into it. And just let me finish off on that note that I agree with a previous speaker that human and command is crucial. So the tagline you need to use is that the algorithm can advise, but it's the human that has to decide ultimately. And looking at European regulation, this also means that together with the ETUC, we are very strongly pushing for, well, that will be in the next term of the Commission only, but we really would like to look into a new piece of legislation that would be very much looking into AI at work in employment as a separate legislative project. And we really need the support of the European think tanks, of progressive leadership in Europe to push that agenda forward. It's really important. So again, a call to you to get going on that. And we need to fill the gaps left by the GDPR and the current AI Act discussion. So that is a big call to you. So, but basically, it's all about social dialogue and collective bargaining, and it's your moment to act upon it. So that would be my input.
Thank you, Birte.
Thank you.
It's really important, but I think you really do stress the proactivity that we really need to act. But you also sort of touch upon the sort of division of labor between national initiatives. You say you got to go out there and use your collective bargaining to make an impact here, and then on the other hand, the role of the EU. Did I hear you right when you said the EU should push for making regulation that makes a level playing field with transparency and expertise, and then the unions and the national actors have to exploit that platform? Is that a correct interpretation of your, or am I pushing it?
Yeah, no, you're not pushing it. I mean, in the end, this is what it's all about. It's that the EU is obviously only creating a framework, and given with the situation of a lot of right-wing governments in Europe and so on, it's very hard to push anything through council in a worker-friendly manner. But whatever the framework will be, that will be decided by the European institutions. In the end, it's up to the national and local level to transpose that in your own contacts and to push forward and to really go for it. But this is where I think that national and company negotiations have a crucial role to play to go beyond whatever the framework is. So in that respect, yes.
Great. Thank you again. So, Lauri, you should take us into some of the sectors where we have the most of it, the most of algorithmic management, and you have done a lot of work on that. So please make us smarter, enlighten us about the challenges that you see in these sectors, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm Lauri Finér. I'm the director of Sorsa Foundation, a Finnish social progressive think tank. I hope I'm able to respond to these high demands. When I was asked to this panel, I kind of first responded that, well, I'm not an expert on algorithms at the workplace. I'm a tax expert, but like Gunilla Svantorp brought up in her speech, it's also a tax issue, and tax is a good perspective to kind of look at this phenomena. So, as an example, when I was a few years ago working for the Social Democratic Party as tax policy advisor, and we were doing a tax policy program for the party, and I think this issue was discussed much during the process, and especially in relation to platform economy and gig economy. I think I'll give 3 examples from that, or points from that perspective. I'm afraid some of the previous speakers have stolen my points, or at least the first one. So I'll probably be a bit more brief about this. But obviously it's about bargaining power. Or division of power, as Elisabeth put it in the first speech today. So the algorithms at the workplace and also the data behind the algorithms weaken the bargaining position of workers, since work that has been previously done by employees is then done by private entrepreneurs that have less bargaining power. For example, their rights are not protected by laws and unions. And worse bargaining power means obviously less salary and worse working conditions. This brings the issue to my second point, which is more related to tax issue. So why actually is the bargaining power worse for the private entrepreneurs compared to employees? Obviously, there are several reasons. Many of them have been discussed already in the previous speeches. One reason is that they have worse insurance protection, because at least in the Nordic model and in Finland, for example, the social insurance is kind of provided in relation to being an employee. So it's a sort of a tax deducted from salary. How the social insurance is paid, and then again the private entrepreneurs, it's more voluntary, the insurance, and because of this they are at least in the short run able to decrease their prices. The employers are able to bargain the salaries and working rights lower because of this. But in the long run, it's a problem, since when the insurance is needed, the protection is lower, and it's also a matter of inequality, since some of the people will need the insurance and some will need it less. And for the best of, it might be even a good issue that they don't have to pay the tax, the social insurance contributions when they earn a lot of money, and they can probably might be able to invest it elsewhere where they profit a lot. The third point, also in relation to tax issue, it's about administrative burden that it's shifted to the workers in this shift where work is done by private entrepreneurs. So if there's a big company with employees, for example, the accounting and the tax reporting is done by the big company, centralized. It's often very effective if a big company does it, but when the work is done by private entrepreneurs, often they have to do their own accounting, their own tax reporting, and if there's, for example, only one worker who doesn't know anything about tax reporting or accounting, it might be ineffective, expensive, and in that sense it doesn't even bring the benefits of the possible benefits of digitalization. So kind of to conclude these 3 points, currently at least algorithms at the workplace facilitate repression and even for majority of the people, but then again, as said in previous speeches, it's about threats and potential. It's about utopia and dystopia. So it's about kind of regulating the level playing field to generate welfare. Yeah, I think this kind of the point was also discussed much about a book by Acemoglu and Simon Johnson published earlier this year in the book Power and Progress. So digitalization doesn't bring welfare if it's not regulated, to put it short. And that's why it's important we're discussing the issue here today.
Thank you very much, Lauri. And I actually think you did bring a number of new perspectives to the debate. Because first of all, how does it help us to talk about employee rights and workers' rights if part of the digital revolution implies that people are not even employees anymore, or workers? They are self-employed, like in Volt or Uber or whatever. Then it's a new challenge. It's a new challenge that you suggest cannot be solved unless we regulate. So I think that's something new that you brought to the table that we also have to. I mean, part of the digital revolution also creates new categories that not necessarily fit into, or at least I think we can adapt them to the collective bargaining system, but we really have to be smart about it. And then the other thing you also said, which is also really part of this discussion, is, I mean, tax avoidance and the fair bargain. I mean, administrative burdens, and you said the social insurance, which is more voluntary, but you can also see sort of a much larger risk of not being able to create a solid tax base. So I think that's at least a couple of challenges that we have to include in this digitalization from the gig economy. So thank you for your comments on our whole. I mean, challenging our concepts of employees and employers. Do you think that we can solve it within a collective agreement system, or do we need government more stern or more solid government regulation? What's your own take on it?
I think it's obviously a challenge, and I think it's a challenge a lot for the unions as well. So also maybe the workers working as private entrepreneurs, they should be doing more bargaining more collectively. I think that's the only way to do it.
And not throwing antitrust regulation laws in the head of them, but seeing them as workers who can make bargain on collectively. Thank you very much again. So Thorben, now we have to expand it to, when we had our coordination meeting, we say, well, it's not only in the platform and gig economy. And then you said, we also have challenges in the traditional sectors with algorithmic management and AI. Please enlighten us.
Thank you, Asbjørn, and thank you for having me here. Dear colleagues, dear comrades, my name is Thorben Albrecht. I'm the policy director of IG Metall, that is the largest German union, representing 2 million plus members in different sectors from steel to ICT, car engineering, etc. We, different to the Nordic model, we represent everybody from the unskilled worker up to the software engineers, all kinds of qualification. But I also have a past in politics. I've been in the Social Democratic Party, had different posts, and I was a state secretary at the Labor Ministry some while ago, and the older generation in this room might remember that we then issued a green paper and a white paper called Work 4.0, and dealing with digital challenges already in 2014, and the white paper was then published in 2016, so I'm around for this a bit. But the question was, which sectors will be affected? And I would say all. We had a poll published last week in Germany where a representative panel of companies was asked, will you introduce AI systems in the near future? Are you about to introduce them? And they asked companies from commerce, from services, and from manufacturing. And the result was quite interesting. 14% of the commerce companies said, yes, we will introduce it in the near future. 18% of the services companies, but 40% of the manufacturing companies. So I think it's not only about services, it's not only about the gig economy. I've been working on that also a lot, and I think it's important, but we should not limit it to that. What are the fields? When we look, I'm currently looking, and I'm not there yet. I hope some people in the room are ahead of me. But when you look at this large, this generative AI based on large language models and how they work, it's very interesting. I think 2 aspects. One is the miracle we've seen in the past, that we have a lot of digitalization but no productivity gain. That might be overcome with this new AI technologies. Can't be sure, but I think there are some hints in it. And the second is, of course, because they try to be universal instruments, what we talked about also in digitalization some time ago, but never were too sure about it, is digital, or are digital technologies really the new electricity? So be used for any different kinds. I think with the new models, this is possible. We can see that. It's not only used in administrative tasks, of course, translation, etc., there it's quite obvious, but also it can be used to help coding. I wouldn't say it can take over coding, but it can help coding as a co-pilot. It can be used in research and development a lot. That will be a field where it will be very important. We can also see that the robots we use in our factories, especially collaborative robots, they will improve a lot through these new AI systems. In the past, robots already had eyes to see and sensors to feel, but still it was very complicated, really. If you look at if you go into a car industry, how they are applied, there are a lot of limits still. But with this new technology, the robots will have ears and understanding of voice, and they will have a voice themselves. So the collaboration between workers on the shop floor and robots, I think, will improve a lot. So I think digitalization goes to another step now and will be more important in all kinds of sectors of our economies and of our world of work. So what do we need? If we want to maintain a model like in the Nordics or like in Germany, where workers have a say in these processes, we need, and Birte talked a lot about it, and I don't want to repeat it, a legal framework that is suitable. In Germany, we already have some rights because any technology that is used to control the performance and the behavior of workers needs co-determination. Works councils have a say, and it's very close to the Nordic model on the company level. And we have to really extend this to all kinds of these technologies. We would argue not only that are used for this control, but can be used, should be in the co-determination system. And I think the AI Act, with saying that it's a high-risk technology, if it's applied in the workplace, hints at that too. So we need this regulatory framework, but we also need trade unions and works councils who are ready to work with this. And I think this is my main point. We need knowledge and training, both for trade unions and works councils. Again, Birte already talked about it, but also for the workers. Because the jobs of the future, they will neither disappear, nor will they completely change, but they will change. And we will have much more of merger of different competences we need. We already in Germany have a job description that's called a mechatronic, that merges mechanics and electronics. That was introduced I think in the 1990s. And we now need people who have much more ICT understanding of AI, but also soft skills, because soft skills, human skills, will be becoming much more important when we use this AI. So knowledge, training, upskilling is one issue. The second is change management and work organization. These technologies can be introduced in so different ways. They can be used, like very often in the platforms, to completely control workers, but they can also be used as tools that can be used to improve also working conditions and the way we organize work. But the crucial question is, who has the say? Is it a human in the loop, like Sam Altman, or I think even Elon Musk would say? Then you're really led by machines. Or is it what Birte already talked about, and I had the honor to have been part of an ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work, was then headed by the then Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. And we came up with the slogan saying, we need human in command. And I think this is the difference. Do you have a human in the loop, or do you have human in command? And human command doesn't mean management in command for me, but it means workers' representatives and workers being in command in this work processes. Very important. Third element, in the past, to put it a bit simply, when these new technologies, IT technologies, were introduced, works councils could only say thumbs up or thumbs down. We accept it because it's a good system, it works for the workers, it's not too much control, thumbs up, or no, it's control, thumbs down. We cannot do that in the future or even today, and we already are changing this in Germany. Because the systems, of course, are developing every day, every hour. They're changing all the time. And that means also the potential for control, for changing work arrangements is changing all the time. So we need what we also introduced in some companies, what we call process agreements. We need to have regularly update, take a look. Works councils must look how this systems develop and what does this mean for the workers. We have to have the right to interfere not only in the beginning, saying thumbs up or thumbs down, but we have to have a revision on a regular basis and whenever changes occur. So I think there are a lot of things to do for trade unions. But if we have a model where trade unions, works council have a strong say, and if we are able to defend these rights, then I'm quite optimistic that trade unions and works councils can make sure that the opportunities are used. The reduction of heavy and boring tasks is possible with these technologies. The potential upskilling of workers is possible, but only if we had a good regulation and if we have strong trade unions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. I was trying to listen through the lens of threat or potential through your talk, and it kind of shifted all the time for me. Then it was a threat, but then you immediately pointed at, well, there's also potentials. So I guess is what you are saying that if we have strong regulatory framework and strong traditions, even expanded forms of co-determination and involvement, then we should embrace it, or then we might as well embrace it, because then we can make the best of it?
It's always in working life, when it comes to trade unions and employers, it's about power. And if we have the power, then we can be optimistic to put it into a positive direction.
Good. That's very strong message. Thank you. Okay, last, a few words from Harry.
Hello.
On the and expanding on the potentials and the threats, and giving a bit of a broader perspective on that. Thank you.
Well, actually, I mean, it saves me time, perhaps.
Take one of the other ones.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Turn that one off. Sorry. There's a little bit of feedback there. So I mean, actually, quite a lot of the comments already have made points that I was planning on making much better. So maybe I can curtail it a little bit. I mean, my kind of entry into working on the future of work issue has largely been trying to push back against utopian and dystopian perspectives, which don't provide a very good basis for policy making, because they lead to knee-jerk reactions based upon hype. And as Antti pointed out in the beginning comments, these kind of visions of the future of work come and go every 10 or 20 years on a perpetual cycle since the beginning of capitalism, and before that actually, and often don't work out quite the way that we expect. And that's because there's a lot of contingency involved in this, whether companies invest in it. Humans are also very awkward. We're embodied people with sense of morals. We struggle, and it complicates things for employers, luckily. And the question is always, is this time different? Well, I think some of the automation debate of the past couple of decades has been a bit overblown, but the algorithmic management question seems to be permeating the workplace in a much more substantial way, and that's why it's very important, the work everyone's doing here today. I was going to play a little bit of devil's advocate kind of position coming in at the end and talk about some potential positives. And what I'm particularly interested in is the potential for the technology itself to be an aid to bargaining and an aid to worker power. So not just workers having power, but is there capacity within the technology to give workers power? And in doing so, kind of compare this to scientific management or in the past, which came at a period where people thought the assembly line was going to mean the end of work and workers kind of totally beaten down and downtrodden, and scientific management being the kind of, I guess, the capitalist justification for that form of exploitation. But actually, within that context, that did open up quite a lot of capacity for workers to get ahead in the workplace and find new forms of power. And people talk about digital Taylorism today. The question is, can that digital Taylorism reconstitute some of the gains that Labour made in the age of scientific management, or in the age of Taylorism 1.0? What Taylorism and scientific management did was set a rate for the job, or one best way to complete the task, articulated with how that was then valorised in the market, the market standards of productivity prevailing at the time. And what that did create a set of clear kind of measures, I guess, in the workplace, which workers were able to fight over, collectively bargain around, and construct wage productivity bargains, which saw some countries through inflation in the post-war period, but also acted as the basis for social and industrial compromises that strengthened liberal democracies at a time of great threat. So there's in terms of our own time, some type of possible relationship there. And there's the McKinsey slogan, what gets measured gets managed, but what gets measured also gets mediated. What gets measured also acts as a basis for negotiation. And we've got two kinds of poles two kinds of polarities in the labour market now. We have people that are measured very strictly, but don't always have access to those forms of measurement they're subject to. You also have a lot of people who feel their work doesn't really have measure. They find it quite hard to say, this is what my work is valued as, this is what I'm doing, pay me this, you bosses, for the work that I'm doing. And actually, the pandemic's been a real forum for some of those struggles. I can think about in a UK perspective, particularly the social care sector, carers, the under-recognised, undervalued, socially reproductive work that makes society go round. Those people are often quite strictly measured mobile carers in their cars, for instance, is another group of people who are platformized in some way, but they don't really have any purchase on that measure to be able to then to speak back to their employers and be able to use that to leverage improvements in pay and condition. So it's a question of power. There's a group of people who are measured. There's a group of people who feel like they could be measured a bit more, actually. But it's the question of who controls that measure. And I guess the difference between the assembly line in the past, where the shop steward or union had the power to turn the key and turn the assembly line off, they had a agreed set of objective measures with employers. They could say, well, look, so many pieces have rolled off the line today, we want this in return for it. And actually that could even be scaled up to the national level as the basis for state brokered bargains as well. That the black box quality of these measurements that are being incubated by the platform and the lack of information, which has already been spoken to, inhibits the capacity of workers to be able to strike those kinds of bargains around those forms of measurement. And that's where politics and policy comes in ultimately, because policy and politics set the ground for the power that's available to people to be able to comprehend the measures they're subject to and be able to bargain around them. And that's why I think these suggestions that have been put forward already today, particularly around information, openness, cracking open that black box, make this, that's a really important first step to giving workers what I would term, actually, this is a term from Marx's Capital, actually. He says that whilst measurement and value in the workplace act as a form of a means of exploitation, they also give the worker room to move in terms of the struggle that they have. It creates a space in which struggle can be conducted over the terms under which people work. That's a mild reformist aim hidden between the lines of an otherwise revolutionary text, but I think it's a good one to look at. And actually, if you look at the gig economy, a lot of the struggles that have opened up in terms of sometimes wildcat or militant forms of new trade unionism in the UK, at least, have partly been about trying to crack open this black box and repurpose the measurements to which those workers are subject by the platforms, and try to use those in terms of leverage, and also stop the rhetorical assembly line as well by not delivering Deliveroo customers their goods, for instance, as well. So those forms of leverage that arose around the scientific management, it is possible to see those reconstituted for the age of algorithmic management, but policymakers and politicians have a role to play to create the playing field on which those struggles can take place, and that's about information and data and access and all the other issues that have been raised today. On the way here, I was actually marking a set of, as I'm an academic, and I have to do this alongside all the other interesting stuff I do, marking some student work, some dissertations by our postgraduate students, majority of whom are from China, and they're very preoccupied with algorithmic management in the workplace. It allows them a way to look at issues around measurement and surveillance without necessarily always touching upon the issue of the state, which obviously is quite a present issue for them, and they obviously, for understandable reasons, find it difficult to be able to articulate that in their written work. I read lots of really interesting stuff about the way that algorithmic management functions in China. Now there, workers are not going to have the state come to their aid in terms of creating a level playing field about surveillance. The difference is in societies like ours is that we should be living up to the values which we claim make us different, and opening that stuff up to allow struggles for more emancipation and freedom to proceed through the work relationship. And I think there's been great ideas already proposed, as I said, to give those struggles room to move, as Mark said. So yeah, thank you.
Good old Marx still has some valid points. I was thinking about the potentials you said, during the Taylorist, Fordist revolution, but you also said that at that point of time you could sort of turn off the machine and you had this power because the organization of work was bound in a time and place. So there was, in some sense, it was easier to organize, but I love the idea that you say that this could be a potential new platform for organizing. But is it equally I mean, can you all see like the hundreds of people running into the factory in the 1930s, or think of the Deer Hunter, the start of the movie. So they're all there. So it's easier to organize. So can your sort of comparison travel, or are there new challenges? Do we need? Are there new obstacles to that form of organizational strive?
Yeah, I mean, the point about the temporality and spatial character of organising is a really important one, isn't it? And I think probably a lot of us are finding in our workplaces with this new normal post-pandemic is actually is much harder to organise because there's fewer people around. There's been some great academic analyses of the labour process in gig and platform work, for instance. And there is still a point of production. It's just the point of production is the platform as opposed to the physical workplace. And if you start to think about it like that, you can use those old forms of power at the point of production. But you do. I'm not a scholar of the gig and platform economy, but those struggles that have ensued in terms of platform work in cities in the UK have had that type of physical element, in that there are still places where people coagulate as human embodied individuals and struggle, basically. So yeah,
that's a good point. Thorben, you would like to add a comment to that, and then we open up for questions from the floor. So now you get ready with your questions.
I think a lot of things are new, but there might be some historical examples which we can use. There's been one sector which has been very fluent, very international, and with the platforms, one thing is if you have local services. Other platforms like coding, architecture, design, they are worldwide. You don't have any connection to the ground there. But even there we have a historical example. That is the seafarers. That's very international, very fluent. And there we have an organization able to push through wages. And we have a legal framework with the Maritime Labour Convention, which is then implemented in the single countries. And the collective agreement is pushed through, and there's a de facto minimum wage for sailors worldwide, pushed through because the port workers are not unloading ships that don't sign to the agreement. And I think that is possible for platforms too, as you mentioned. We have the platform, so we need not only the solidarity, which is difficult to organize already between the people doing the work for the platform, but we need the solidarity of those people, or self-employed, with the people working in the platforms, to have them stop the machine if necessary.
So that's good. That's also about this physicality. But if you think smart about it, there will almost always be a point where you could sort of manifest your power or countervailing power. Thank you. Okay, a lot of issues here has been raised, very concrete, but also wide-ranging, from policy measures, the interplay between regulation and union initiative, the challenges in the gig economy, which also has challenging our whole notions of employee-employer distinction, and potential for tax evasion and the opaqueness of what is going on, but also the fact that we see it big time in traditional economy, and both you and Harry talked about the potentials for organizing. Bring it on.
Svantorp from Finansforbundet in Norway. We organize employees in the financial sector, and we're very much thinking about how to get something into the collective agreement that makes sense in terms of both what Birte and Thorben also talked about. And so I just want to touch on one specific point that you took up, Birte, about technical expertise from the outside, and then Thorben, you were talking about that it's actually a continuous process of systems evolve. So how do you see, if you would want to put something very concrete into a collective agreement, that you would permanently need this kind of outside technical expertise? How can we think about it in a very practical way?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I don't have a ready-made answer to that. What we have seen already is that there are collective agreements done already that have clauses where it's very clear that whenever new technology is introduced, there is an obligation for consultation information. And some companies have a kind of advisory board they've created that would be then bipartite, where the employers and employees would sit together and try to negotiate on exactly that point. And also the technical expertise, you can have it as a reference when you say, okay, the company has to pay. I mean, that would be extremely idealistic, but in the ideal world, you'd have the company even, and it's necessary to pay for a neutral external expert that could advise the union on that specific type of technology that will be introduced. That could be a clause you could put. Because otherwise it's not feasible, because otherwise there's no resources within the union. So I would advise to go down that line, if that's of any help. I don't have a concrete example of that particular question as of yet, but as I say, we're in the process of collecting that information and happy to share.
Well, my name is Jonas Söderström. I'm an independent expert in digital workplace issues and an author. Just a couple of observations to the last topic. The specific technical expertise that the labour movement would benefit from, I would say, is not the general technical expertise, but the profession of user experience professionals, because they are the people that do the connection between humans and the machines, and that is the crucial point, I think. So just an observation. Then another observation. I was happy to hear Thorben talk about the need of regulatory framework and the benefits of that. The problem I have with that is that we already have such a framework in Sweden since many years back. It's actually the first clause of the second chapter of the Swedish law about the work environment says that the co-workers should have the say in all changes in the workplace. The problem is that is not the case with digital systems and has not been the case for the last 25 years. So in many respects, I think that unfortunately the trade unions have surrendered to the tech business in this respect. So the question is, how do we restore that? I understand you can't speak for Sweden, but it would be interesting to hear your opinion on how to get further in that direction when we actually have the framework. Yeah.
There's one more question, maybe. So.
Oh, well, hi, Gustav from the Swedish. Where am I from? Transport Union, of course. English, yes, good. I would like to say hello, sweet summer childs, and welcome to the party. We've been addressing this quite for a long time, and we have also tried to address GDPR when that came, the European lawmaking, and we found quite fast that it's based on the individual rights of persons. So we, as a union, has no say in this. And then we came to the conclusion that people will not use these rights because there is nothing protecting them. We are used, at least in Sweden, to be the protective embodiment for the worker. But when the worker is facing represalia for going to our using GDPR, we cannot protect them, and we have found that our government can't protect them either because they're copping out. I could go into the specific of our national embodiment of GDPR, but I won't. It would take too long. The thing is, we need more regulation that would give unions the power to use GDPR to protect individual rights. And this is a crucial flaw that we have tried the legal way in Sweden all the way, and we have failed. So that would be a good thing to take with you.
Thank you. Actually, both questions is about the value of legal frameworks that may not work. The first one was about the Work Environment Act, which I think is actually the same in Denmark, which potentially could be invoked and said, well, this is decisions concerning the well-being of workers, therefore we should have to be consulted. But it doesn't happen. And then the other question about conferring upon workers individual rights that cannot be upheld or supported. So a last comment about the regulatory route or question of power that you've all touched upon. First one, Birte, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the kind of crossroads where we are at the moment, and that is the question to national unions as well, in terms of how do you redefine the responsibility of unions as a collective versus individual workers, and especially for like transport and food delivery, for instance. I can give the example of Just Eat in Spain. Food delivery workers have actually managed to get an agreement where they have clauses on algorithmic management where they say that the algorithm is not allowed to just dismiss like that a worker based on ratings, etc. So there are actually good examples already in place. Now, having those rules and then or regulations and going to court afterwards is a different story, because you are right pointing out there are flaws in the GDPR at European level, which is exactly why I mentioned that the idea at European level from the European trade union movement is now to really go in the direction of a bigger scale legislation that would try to fill these gaps and try to enable more a collective approach to that. We're not there yet, but we see that even with good regulation, there are still things that are still impossible to address, and we need to figure that out. So that's actually on the agenda. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And I would a bit disagree. I'm not sure if unions really surrendered and saying we don't use our rights when it comes to digital issues. But it's probably not easy. So I think what we need to do, and as I said, in Germany also we have this context, we have the rights, they could be improved always, but we could use what we have. But what we need for that is that we do have not only union officers, but also works councils members in the companies that know about the rights, but they also have the general understanding of the technologies. They need the special expertise when it comes to a certain product. But I think I would say quite self-confident that we are really training our union reps, our works councils with these issues, how to deal with them, what kind of agreements are already there, what could be good examples. And then, of course, it's still translating that into the current situation you have there. But I think this is very important, and it's not new. I mean, it's already new technologies have been introduced all the time. Maybe a bit more complicated there, but that's the responsibilities of trade unions, I would say. And really, we have to take this up. About individual workers' rights in the GDPR, you're completely right. It's based on an individual situation. It's more looking at consumers rather than workers. But still, I think there are possibilities there. If a works council sees that there's an infringement of data rights of workers in the workplace, they can address it towards the management. They can also support, that's what we do, individual workers going to court with legal advice, with payments. We even take payments if they are sacked and to make their living through this, so we can support them. That doesn't mean that the regulation couldn't be better. And there's one clause in the GDPR which I think is important, quite weak, but gives some possibilities. It says for data protection in the workplace, there can be more specific rules in national legislation. And that's what we are aiming at in Germany now. We said we want a law for workers' data right protection, a national law, which it's officially not allowed to go beyond the GDPR, but can be more specific. And so I think we can go beyond. We are now pushing for this kind of law on the national level, which is in line with the GDPR, but takes into account that a customer is in a different position towards a provider. He can always step out and say, I don't use this product, this platform any longer. A worker is in a dependency situation against the employer. We have to take this into account, make a regulation accordingly. And the GDPR has this little loophole, and we need to use it.
Thank you, Thorben, for closing comments. Lauri, and then Harry for some comments on the last issues.
I think I have to conclude from a bit different perspective, since I'm no expert on employment law or haven't worked for unions as well. So, but I think we go back to this very old issue that that kind of the unions, the labor, we have the people, and the capitalists have the money. So we go back to this kind of battle, and I see kind of this vicious circle where the decreasing bargaining power means worse regulation, and worse regulation then again decreases the bargaining power, and this is something that needs to be stopped, and the way to do it on a general level, it's not very maybe that good concrete what you should do now, but is that we should unite people against the money, and how to do it. I don't know, in Finland, for example, the employer organizations, the corporate organizations, they are, for example, visible at the schools, so they have this course for every sixth grade students where they show their point how the companies are important for the government, but the unions are not represented in this world. They show to the students. So I think we have to start from very basic level to kind of to unite the people, but I don't know how to do it.
That was another implicit Marx quote, wasn't it, from 1848? Workers in all countries. Okay, Harry, you get the last point.
Well, I mean, actually, Marx's point there is probably, an example of what I was just about to say. So sometimes the really big solutions to things can sometimes be not always address the specificities of how this stuff plays out, and the digital transformation is being felt so differently by people in different sectors. We can have an underlying set of rights, but there's also a need for more specific approaches. And in the UK, we look to the Nordic model as something like a kind of dream across the water or something like that we could have only had, and we can't recreate that overnight. But and we also. We're inheriting a totally decimated set of institutional levers, and union density historically low, all these kinds of issues, and the way that's kind of moving is towards kind of more specific, smaller scale, slightly more agile ways of trying to re-regulate the world of work and employment, that don't always require unions to be present, but may help set the ground for that. So fair pay agreements, which is something the Labour Party are looking at from New Zealand, and starting off on a sector by sector basis. And I guess that kind of leads me to a kind of point, again, devil's advocate a little bit, is that businesses too have an interest in trying to create a set of measurements and a set of processes in the workplace that can allow upticks in productivity and and modernisation and things like that. And that, of course, at the moment, all the power lies with employers to be able to dictate how algorithmic management manifests like that. But that, I guess, the way it's been phrased a lot in debates in the UK is around social partnership and the idea that you could get businesses interested in a more coordinated workplace. And that's basically at the moment the best we've got to try to take a softer approach to trying to achieve some of these more collective forms of agreement around this. That is always one route, I guess, is to get the bosses on side as well. Difficult as it may be, they have to be really in a bad situation for that to work. But the UK is maybe a good example of a bad situation. So.
Thank you all. This was extremely inspiring and a very enlightening, also to me, new perspectives. It seems to me that a good place to end is fair digitalization is difficult even with unions, but it is impossible without unions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. It's shaping up to be a great day. We've just been told that that we're living the dream here in the Nordic region, and Gustav just said, "Welcome to the party." So you know, it seems like it's a good day. I'm proud of my former union transport for standing up and speaking the truth. On that note, I think we're all a bit hungry. There is lunch served outside. We have about 50 minutes before we reconvene. And when we do, it's time to talk about how algorithmic management and the digitalization affects us as people. What does it do to people to constantly be watched? So that's going to be the first topic of discussion after lunch. So help yourselves.